Ko mōkau ki runga ko tāmaki ki raro, ko manga tōtō ki Wainganui, te kaukauro o Pātetere, pari hauraki, pari Waikato, karanga mai rā. Kei ngā iwi o te motu tahuti mai ki te hui, pōti rua tekau, rua tekau. Kara hui hui mai. Welcome to the Hui Pōti 2020. I'm Mihi Ngārangi Forbes, and tonight the political taniwha of Hauraki-Waikato face-off. Now, so far this year, more than 33,000 Māori have registered to vote in the electorate, and in 2017, 65.4% of eligible voters showed up to the ballot box. Soon, we'll hear what the people of Hauraki-Waikato are most concerned about this election. Engari, matua rā me tūtaki ki ngā kaitono. Our candidates are the Labour Party's Nanaia Mahuta, who's held the seat for 24 years, and the challenger, the Māori Party's Donna Pokere-Phillips. Tēnā kōrua. I'm going to start by asking you both for your opening statements. Kei a koe, Nanaia.
Kei ngā iti, kei ngā rahi, kei ngā whānau katoa o Hauraki-Waikato tēnā koutou. I'm standing again to seek to be the representative of Hauraki-Waikato. You've placed your faith in me over a number of years, and I know that it's important to ensure that we have strong representation in the electorate. There's some real challenges ahead of us as we face COVID, and as we work our way through what are the most important things we need to focus on. We went early and we went hard as a government to ensure that we put the health and safety of people first, and now we've got to really turn our minds to what is it going to take to ensure that our regions are growing and thriving and that the economy supports our people. And that's what I'll be focused on. It's important to ensure that we will have jobs for our young people and opportunities so they will not miss out. We will strengthen our public education and health system. We'll continue with the treaty settlement process, and importantly, our government will lead in a way that will put the values of this country and what makes us unique and distinct as we seek out further opportunity. That opportunity should also come back to our people, our iwi in our regions, so that our young people will flourish in the way forward. So if you continue to put your trust and confidence in me, I will not let you down. But if you vote for me, I'll ensure that there'll be a strong voice around the cabinet table.
Thank you, Nanaia. Donna?
E te iwi, maranga ake ai. E te iwi, maranga ake ai. Tēnā koutou e te iwi, tēnā koe mihi, tēnā koe Nanaia. I've been working on the front line with our people for many, many years. Sadly, they feel that their voices have been silenced and no one cares. I'm standing for Hauraki-Waikato because I care. I care that our babies are being taken by the state. I care because their parents and their grandparents are being incarcerated. I care about the state of our whānau and the state of the environment. The Māori Party is about protecting Papa Tuanuku and protecting our whakapapa. We will bring our babies home. We will bring their parents and their grandparents home. Māori Party says you will not take one more acre. You will not take one more litre. You will not take one more mokopuna. The Māori Party is the only true Indigenous voice for our people. We are accountable only to our own. We do not dance to the beat of another man's drum. We will hold the Crown accountable to ensure the rights under te tiriti are honoured. So kia kaha e te iwi, if you don't want 24 more years of the same, I ask you to give Donna Pokere-Phillips your candidate vote and give your party vote to the Māori Party.
Rawe ngā kōrero, tēnā kōrua. Well, Hauraki-Waikato is home to both the kingitanga and some of Aotearoa's most idyllic places, including the Coromandel Peninsula and the Black Sands of Kāwhia Moana. But the real jewel in the crown lies between Te Kaupata and Ngārua Wāhia. And it's where we sent our reporter Cleo Fraser to see what's got people talking.
They call us the city's town, but it's not the chancellor.
There's a lot of good people here.
It's marvellous. You know, I love hunting.
This is my dream. Welcome to the Waikato Hauraki Electorate.
We're here in Huntly, just north of Kirikiriroa, population 8,500. Famous for, well, this power plant, the Decker sign, and a whole bunch of league players, including Lance Hohaia, Wairangi Kopu and Tawera Nico, just to name a few. Let's go and find out what the big issues are here in Huntly.
There's a lot of things that need to be worked on here, big time, definitely.
We've got housing shortages, unemployment, education obviously after COVID and during COVID, and what to do about it. How do we upgrade technology to allow them to keep going to school?
Back in the day, jobs were a dime a dozen. That's the main drawback, I think, for the young ones, is having to leave town, home, to get employment, get mahi and get the pūtea. Yeah, they have to go.
For me, just the gangs and all that, because some of them do bad stuff, and it's kids as well.
At the moment, they're lost. There's nothing really for them to do here. There's a lot of issues like drugs and alcohol. You know, the identity's taken. A lot of them go on to gang culture.
I reckon people should make more places around here where kids can go.
Maybe like a community centre, maybe it's just something for our youth.
So my dream here is for this space to be utilised as a youth centre. So down the bottom there's a mezzanine floor where we can utilise it as a hangout hub for the kids. The offices at the top where we can utilise it for social workers, counsellors, nurses, doctors. So having this space will be an opportunity for them to grow on that and learn who they are so that they can grow into aspiring people.
So what did we learn? People here in Waikato Hauraki say they want more affordable housing, and they say they want more community centres for rangatahi. The question is, what are you going to do about it?
Well, Donna, a youth centre for rangatahi seems fairly easy. Would that be on your list?
Pardon?
A youth centre for rangatahi, something you'd like to do?
Well, what I'd like to see, Mihi, is that organisations like Wahi Whānui get funded because at the moment they're running on a sniff of an oil rag. So before we look at new initiatives, I think it's really important that the government looks at the initiatives that are already within the community and functioning really well and support those kaupapa.
Ka hoki mai ki tērā pātai, because, you know, that's what the voices of the regions there. The Provincial Growth Fund has funded a number of community centres around New Zealand, $400,000, Woodville, Gisborne, Katikati. How does Huntly get on the list?
Yeah, by the community getting together and having a unified set of aspirations that then are presented in partnership with other people across the community. So I'm all for more opportunities for rangatahi in Huntly, and it would be important for the council, who has also said that they would focus on providing more services for rangatahi, to partner with our local groups, and that's really what we need to see in order to see these initiatives come through the Provincial Growth Fund. Something more important though, in terms of a community developing its own roadmap of aspiration, is that Huntly is a small community, so no longer can we expect little groups working in isolation of each other for what should be a very big vision for the town. I grew up for the most part of my life in Huntly, and I know how important it is for greater unity across both sides of the river to work for a sole purpose. Outcomes for young people is just one of them, and the opportunity to ensure that there are places for them to go. But one thing I want to say is good luck to Tūranga Waiwai and Taniwharau, because they'll be playing at the grand final this weekend, and many rangatahi will be there as well.
Ka hoki mai au ki tērā pātai. I'm going to come back to the Provincial Growth Fund, because it was set aside by this government $3 billion over 3 years, you know, to put cash injections into little towns like Huntly. So in the Waikato, the projects like there's a race course in Cambridge for $7 million, a new wharf at Raglan will be given millions. Has the Provincial Growth Fund, Donna, been good for Māori?
I guess it's like any other funding. If you look at, for example, the response budget that the government sent down, I mean, that's $50 billion. And this is just an example of the numbers. If you want to crunch the numbers, Māori only saw 0% 0.003%. Someone else got 99.7%. So I can confidently say that Māori are missing out, and when it comes to the government grants. So it's really important that the Māori Party be there to ensure that 25% of our whānau first policy actually gets directed to Māori, by Māori, for Māori.
Just wrapping up there on the Provincial Growth Fund, if you were to come back into Parliament and if it was to stay there, would you like to see it more equitable for Māori or more needs-based?
Well, one of the things I want to say, I'm not sure where those numbers that were quoted came from, but what I can say is what we did make sure with the Provincial Growth Fund is that the criteria that can be applied takes account of including Māori aspirations within many of the initiatives that were put up in the first round. It is true. Many of those initiatives were put up by councils, and when I think about the initiatives that are coming out of Huntly in particular, the development of the Kimihia Lake is one of those initiatives which is future focused and looking at creating local employment and also environmental education in the community. So I look forward to seeing initiatives like that for the Provincial Growth Fund. We also ring-fenced $100 million to help Māori landowners develop their whenua. So I do believe where those applications have gone up and promoted initiatives that have strong, clear outcomes for Māori, many of them have come through.
Ka pai, kia mau tonu mai rā, te titiro e hoa mā he nui tonu ngā take hei matapaki. We'll be back after the break. Hoki mai anō, you're watching the Hui Pōti 2020 Hauraki-Waikato with our candidates Nanaia, Mahuta no te rōpū reipa, rawa ko Donna Pokere-Phillips. Our next question comes from a well-known voice in the rohe, nō reira kia tahuri aki tātou.
Kia ora te iwi, ko Pātara Berriman tōku ingoa, he uri no konei no rāhui pōkeka, Ngāti Whawhākea, Ngāti Mahuta, Ngāti Kuiarangi, tēnei e mihi nei kia koutou katoa. As a young child, a lot of my parents and my uncles and aunties all worked in the mines and the freezing works and the railways. It was a very buzzing town back then. A lot of people had employment and of course built their houses. My parents bought their house for $60,000. Now you could buy a 3-bedroom house here in Huntly for just under $500,000. And a lot of our whānau are earning probably $40,000 to $50,000 a year, so it doesn't translate. One big question to our candidates here in Hauraki-Waikato, what are you going to do to ensure that our people are employed and housed so that they can stay in their ukaipo, to stay where their home is, where their families are, where their blood, sweat and tears have been for generations now, and not moved on to someplace else because they can't afford to live here anymore.
Pātai pai tērā, Nanaia, hea te whakautu?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's not one that perplexes just Huntly, but many areas across Hauraki-Waikato. What I can say in the Waikato, given the settlement, the Raupatu settlement that was reached, many of the Housing New Zealand homes were offered under first rights of refusal. So there are real strong opportunities for housing partnerships with the iwi in places like Huntly. We do need to build the public stock up though, and the last government didn't put as much attention as we have in ensuring that the public supply of housing is there. And on the issue of home ownership, our progressive home ownership product or model provides an opportunity for those on low to modest incomes to be able to have a pathway for home ownership in partnership with an organisation that can help facilitate that outcome. Can I say though, that the important aspect of housing and making it real for our whānau is to look at a range of opportunities, papakainga, and the availability of that and what that opens up in terms of whenua development as well, and also the ability to partner. And that is the way that this government is working to ensure that we have got different types of housing responses for the need out there in our Māori community.
Ka pai. Donna, what is the aspiration of the Māori Party to fulfil some of those home ownership dreams?
Well, I think it's important to highlight, as Nanaia knows and I know, that there are a lot of barriers to our whānau trying to build on their papakainga, and red tape is part of it. So I'd be really interested to know what Nanaia, as the Minister of Local Government, would do to help our whānau to build on their papakainga.
What would you do? What would the Māori Party do?
Well, I just want to come back to the question about Labour's flagship housing policy. That's been a disaster, Mihi. I mean, they promised 100,000 homes over 10 years, and they've only built 400 homes at the moment. What the Māori Party want to do,
the Māori Party was at the table with the last government, to be fair to this current government, which sold off the state stock. So the question again is, what's the Māori Party's plan to be able to put people like Pātara back into, you know, the opportunity to buy homes?
Well, I can't talk about the old Māori Party because I wasn't part of the party. But what I want to say is that the Māori Party want to create a Māori housing industry where we contract in all the Māori builders, where we set up
a procurement.
Yes, so we're looking at a procurement, but we actually want to create a Māori building industry for our whānau, and it's really important that we understand that at the moment our whānau are being housed in motels. Now, taxpayers are paying $100 million to put our people in motel ghettos.
And again, for a long time that's been happening under the National Māori Party government of the past, where we were paying for motels and stuff. I'm going to give you that question though, like what, as the Minister for Local Government, how can Māori utilise their whānau land better?
Well, two things. What are we doing differently in the housing space and the housing projects that we are investing in, especially public housing? We are opening up the procurement channels to ensure that there is the opportunity for trade training to occur, that we're able to target and identify Māori and Pacific in particular in the construction industry, so that they're coming through. In terms of the question, Mihi, I believe that the opportunity around housing long term is around how we partner with organisations, and so it's going to be critically important for iwi who have aspirations in this space to be able to work with us, and we have a number of iwi already out there who have big ambitions around building homes, and we want to do that.
Is it an option that the Māori Party would support partnership with iwi? For example, recently Waikato Tainui partnered with the government, 50 state homes, I think, on Crown land. Is that something you would continue to do?
Well, if I can take us back to Michael Savage during World War II, and he did create a building industry, and he was able to put a whole lot of housing within the community. And I don't understand why the government doesn't do that. So what I'm saying is that the Māori Party will do that for us. I mean, 400 homes in 3 years.
That's the that's the promise, isn't it? To rebuild the stocks that have been sold off in
But the promise, Mihi, is that we were promised 100,000 homes.
How many would the Māori Party build?
Well, we want to build 2,000 homes within the next 4 years, and like I said, we're going to create a whole industry around there with training, with trade training, bringing our people back to learn new skills and bringing in the experts. So that's how we're going to do it.
Mihi, can I just say that the housing issue is very complex. We have whānau with no housing, so the homelessness issue is significant. We are partnering with Māori community housing providers in the homelessness space, also to move them through into transitional housing or to public housing. It's going to take us some time to build up the public housing stock, but we are doing that. And then we've got other products like papakainga, or partnering with iwi so that iwi are actually taking a more vested interest in housing provision. The 10,000 homes, the 100,000 homes that has been referred to was the Kiwi Build. We've reset Kiwi Build because we weren't able to meet those targets.
Ka pai. Stay with us, folks. When we return, we ask our candidates about one of the most polarising issues of the last 12 months. Hoki mai anō, you're watching the Hui Pōti 2020 Hauraki-Waikato, where two wahine toa vying to win the hearts and minds of the electorate. Our next question involves one of the most contentious issues of the last year, but for many Māori it's been cast a long shadow for generations. Kia tahuri ake tātou.
Kia ora mai tātou, tai te mū mai pi, Waikato tani wharau, he piko he tani wha, no reira tēnā tātou. We need to address the name places within our tribal areas that tell the story of the history that happened to our people during those land wars. Every day we sit alongside these racist names that are in our towns. For example, Bryce Street, Fontensky Street, the city of Hamilton. The young people around the country, they're giving some strong messages that these named places are no longer a part of our history. It's about our history, not about Captain Cook's. And my question to you is, what are you going to do about removing these racial symbols across our country? It needs to be addressed, and it's been sitting there for the last 250 years.
Nanaia o whakaro.
Well, firstly, I want to mihi te Timi because he feels very passionately about this, and it has been an issue that's pervaded many regions as they repatriate their local history back onto the whenua. What I would like to see is the repatriation of our local history and stories back into our towns, cities and communities in a way that upholds what is unique about that town or city or community. And we can do that in a number of ways. This is where local government comes in. One of the things is to ensure that through the process of, for example, consenting for developments, mana whenua is engaged with to be able to be a part of that process at the front end rather than the back end, so that their stories can be told. Another way is obviously the existing way through treaty settlements. Many treaty settlements already repatriate or change names as a result of the agreement with the Crown, and that is a significant way. Then the third way is to do what we're committed to doing, is to ensure that New Zealand history is taught in our schools, so that when people think of Von Tempsky, they attach Von Tempsky to the history within Waikato. If that name got taken away, no one would be none the wiser. I'm not one for removing all statues. In fact, I think statues are a stark reminder of colonisation, which happened in our country, and in the Waikato in particular, is a very salient reminder as to why we have to fight so hard to be able to repatriate the history of our rohe back to where it belongs.
Donna, you know, how whakaro, because without raising history, as Nanaia says, how do we minimise the trauma of Waikato Tainui descendants who live next to these parks and statues and on the streets?
Well, I just want to say it's not just Waikato Tainui. Bryce impacted on Pariaka and Taranaki as well. And I find it abhorrent that when I walk down Bryce Street in Kirikiriroa, when I go out to places like Rahui Pōkeka, where these names, I mean, in regards to Von Tempsky Street and Bryce Street, you know, these are men that pillaged, raped, murdered women and children. So why should we glorify them?
So
why should my uri, why
should
my mokopuna have to walk down that street to be reminded of that whole process?
And that's the question. What would the Māori Party do with those names and statues and park names that are already there?
So what the Māori Party want to do is in 2026 we want to reclaim our name, Aotearoa, and we want to change all those names where we have been oppressed, and we're constantly reminded on a day-to-day basis about the colonisation.
So removing them?
Yes, we support removing them.
Donna touched there on Parihaka, so I'm going to go there. The PGF has given $14 million to Parihaka for a special settlement, which will see 130 jobs and a visitor centre. Now, if you go out to Rangiaowhia, where men, women and children were killed by soldiers, the descendants there call it pāhuatanga, an atrocity. Isn't it time that we address that atrocity?
I'm sure it is well overdue, in fact, and I know that Ngāti Apakura have been working to ensure that Minister Little is aware of the history there, so that story not only can be told, but it also so that Ngāti Apakura, who effectively became gypsies in many respects as a result of Raupati, were displaced across the whole of the rohe. I'm confident that something can be done for Rangiaowhia, but let me come back to the issue of how do we tell our story, because removing statues will not remove the deep racism that exists in many, many communities. Actually telling the story and bringing things to light will help achieve that. That's why I'm so committed to New Zealand history, the history of the New Zealand Wars being taught in our schools.
You'd be open to a Parihaka Rangiaowhia settlement like the Parihaka?
Absolutely. And
separate to a treaty claim?
Absolutely. Totally support that.
I'm just going to ask the two of you, would you both, I want to know your answers, yes or no, would you commit to flying the Māori flag alongside the New Zealand flag on all public buildings every day?
Often that's the case and has happened during Waitangi Day. Can I say that
every day?
Yeah, and many councils are looking to do that voluntarily. I want to come back to the issue of Aotearoa. Many of the many of the historical,
because we're wrapping up, so I'm just getting your personal view. Would you support the Māori flag flying next to the New Zealand flag on any public building every day?
I support the mana of hapu and iwi to fly their flag, and our rohe, it would be the Kingitanga flag.
On the public building, just, you know, for young Māori who walk
what I know is that councils have relationships with their local hapu and iwi. What I know is councils have relationships with their local hapu and iwi, and it would be a conversation to be had.
So not a yes or no?
I think in the Waikato we have a flag that we absolutely would like to see.
Ka pai. And your whakaaro, would you like to see the Māori flag flying next to the New Zealand flag on every public building every day?
Absolutely, and I'd celebrate the day that happens.
Tēnā kōrua. Mena, ko te kai a te rangatira he kōrero, kua whakarangatia mātou i a kōrua. I tēnei pō nō reira, e riri ana ngā mihi ki aku manuwhiri tuarangi. Nanaia, Donna, tēnā kōrua. Thanks for watching. Hui Hoppers, join us next week for our Waiariki and Ikaro Rāwhiti electorate debates. It's sure to be full of surprises. And if you're not enrolled to vote, you still have time. You can do it online at vote.nz. He mahi pai noi ho te rehita, nō reira kia kahara. Nohoro mai rā. The Hui is made with support from New Zealand On Air.